Welcome to The Point. I am John Fugelsang, filling in yet again as guest host for the second time, in spite of overwhelming popular demand and a rather moving letter from Bishop Desmond Tutu. However, I'm here again, and what a week it's been politically and in the news. So many different stories we could talk about. North Korea, of course, is allowing nuclear inspectors to come in and dismantling their entire nuclear program in exchange for food in a deal brokered between the U.S. and Kim Jong-il's son, Fredo. Of course, we had the final ever GOP debate of this primary cycle, happened last week in Arizona. The highlight for me was really seeing Rick Perry sitting right next to Callista Gingrich, because if there is any justice in the world, he had his hand on her thigh, and if there's any karma, she was enjoying it. And of course, James Murdoch not having a good week at all. If you want to let James know how you feel or give him support, just pick up your phone and assume he's already listening in. So it's very exciting to be here with this current panel. Joining me today, we have Alexis Garcia, who is a producer and political correspondent with PJTV. We also have actor and comedian Avi Liberman, one of my favorites, very funny guy. You may have seen him on Craig Ferguson. And Brad Friedman, who's a journalist and the man behind the Brad blog, which covers elections and voting from a, let's just say, somewhat progressive perspective. Fair enough?
An independent, progressive perspective, correct.
It means he's a raging, freedom-hating socialist. And we have some very, very interesting point videos today as well. One from YouTube superstar, the Amazing Atheist, questioning how representative our representative democracy is. You know, I think he should really call himself the easily explained by science atheist, but that's another point. Another from Why Tuesday Executive Director Jacob Soboroff with an idea for increasing voter participation, generated around the idea of not limiting election day to just one day. But first, our first point of the show will come from former Salt Lake City mayor and current presidential candidate for the Justice Party and liberal challenger to Barack Obama, Rocky Anderson.
Hi, I'm Rocky Anderson, and I'm running for President of the United States. My point is, we can do so much better as a nation. And depending on our leadership, we'll pursue the status quo with a greater economic disparity in income and wealth since before the Great Depression, or we will create the conditions for greater economic and social justice. We'll either pursue the same trade policies, sending hundreds of thousands of jobs overseas, or we can choose leadership that will do everything we can to bring those jobs back to the United States, to preserve and protect the interests of working men and women and their families in this country. We can keep pursuing the disastrous foreign policy and empire building and engage in illegal wars of aggression, or we can create the conditions for peace and prosperity. If we want a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, then we, regardless of political affiliations, need to come together and support those who have a record of taking on the powerful, of taking on those who would buy and pay for the White House and our Congress, and instead represent the interests of the public. That's the kind of government we all want. Please join in this exciting grassroots movement. Go to voterocky.org, and you can play a major role in bringing about the kind of positive change we've all been calling for.
Thank you, Rocky. I have mixed feelings about third-party candidates for president, partially because I like third-party candidates, but I'm kind of sitting around waiting for a second party to show up. I want to direct our first question to you, Alexis. You heard Rocky Anderson's speech there. Do you agree with him that the two parties currently leave a lot of Americans without any candidate who represents their view, and that's why we need more third parties?
You know, I do agree with him, and it's interesting because if you look at the numbers since 2008, one of the fastest growing segments of the population is unaffiliated voters. And I mean, myself included, once California changed to an open primary, I was out of the Republican Party, unaffiliated. But you do see so much dissatisfaction, especially playing out in the current GOP primary, with people who just aren't connecting with voters with their candidates. So I absolutely agree. I think that's why you see movements spring up like the Tea Party, like the Occupy movement, that they're looking for someone that is going to represent their values, that is going to go in and not promote big government spending, take on the banks, take on the corporations. And I don't think there's really a candidate out there right now that's presenting these big, bold ideas of change that people want to see.
Really, even among the establishment GOP candidates.
I mean, I think that's why you see this back and forth going on with the primary going between Romney and Santorum. You know, none of them is really a perfect candidate. I think a lot of people are kind of holding their nose right now and going for Romney because you have this electability question that most exit poll voters think that he can beat Obama. But no, I think if you ask any true conservative, they're very wary of both of them, and they don't really believe that once they get into the White House that they're going to tackle the big issue of spending and the economy and actually cut back on government spending.
I think you're right, and I think while a lot of people don't worry about big government, they want good government. But and I think that's kind of what Ron Paul's talking about at some of his saner, more lucid moments. But I do think that it's not so much about people upset with their party. People are upset with the two-party duopoly. And I want to bring Brad and Avi into this because our first third-party president we ever had in this country got in with 38% of the vote, and he was a Republican, and it was Lincoln. So I'm a big believer that third parties are a good thing, and I think that more and more we're seeing a lot of progressives can't stand the Democratic Party, and a lot of conservatives can't stand the Republican Party.
Yeah, but look what a loser Lincoln turned out to be.
Oh, I know, right? Please, didn't even finish his second term.
Never heard of him.
Yeah, who wants a guy like that in office? And if he could have been more vague, that would have really helped
Well,
me.
I have to agree with you on this because, Brad, let me, on the left, we hear a lot about Rocky Anderson because a lot of liberals really can't stand Obama, and they're very disappointed in the Obama agenda, not that he ever pretended to be a liberal lefties. And so I keep hearing Rocky Anderson, he's the guy. But, I'm grateful that he sent us a video, but I hope he'll send us another where he's a bit more specific about why he's the liberal option.
Well, here's what I would like to add, and I haven't interviewed him, so I don't know his position on this, but why the hell didn't he run as a Democrat? He was a Democrat, and a very courageous one, by the way, in Salt Lake City, in Utah, calling for the impeachment of George W. Bush.
Yes.
He was a hero to a lot of folks. He talks about in his video taking on power. What did he say? Taking on the powerful. Well, I can think of no one more powerful than Barack Obama in his party. Why didn't he take him on?
I think for the same.
Democrat?
Well, I think it's the Buddy Roemer lesson, and this is something that fascinates me. That in the GOP, we've seen Buddy Roemer, an elected official. We saw Gary Johnston, who was twice elected governor of New Mexico, not even invited to the debates. But Herman Cain, whose biggest claim to fame is being a lobbyist for McDonald's to keep the minimum wage down, he gets to be in the debates.
Well, listen, but Buddy Roemer actually fought like hell to get into those debates. He spent months as a Republican presidential candidate.
They kept changing the rules, though, right?
They kept changing the rules to not allow. I talked to him. I interviewed him last night, and I asked him why wouldn't they allow you into these Republican debates? And he said, well, first you had to have 1%. I got that, and they said no, you have to have 2%. I got 2% in the polls. He said, okay, now you have to have $500,000.
Well, I think you're proving,
on a
but I think
no corporate money.
I think
so
you're proving the point about why Rocky Anderson wouldn't want to run as a Democrat. He's not going to get to debate Barack Obama.
But he didn't even try. Get in there. You're a Democrat. Get in there and try.
Get his ass whipped. I mean,
So get your ass whipped for a cause. Ron Paul has been getting his ass whipped for a cause for the past decade.
But Ron Paul,
but hang on a second.
But Ron Paul is doing it now after having several runs for president as a third-party candidate. Now he's back with the Libertarian.
Actually, I think he had one, and that was in 1988. And for the last, I don't know how many presidential cycles, he's run as a Republican, and he has moved the party. Yes, they keep calling him a crazy guy from Mars, but he has moved the party. The party has gone to the Ron Paul position on point after point. Why isn't Rocky Anderson doing that if he wants to take on the powerful?
Right, and I wouldn't call him crazy. I'd call him more Harvey Dent. He's one acid splash away from being, half lunatic. So I'd give Ron Paul.
Which one? You're going to Ron Paul, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, just his foreign policy is what people go like, this guy's out of his mind. But
His foreign policy is what makes people like him.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it goes against like 150 years.
To your point, what you were saying, he's been talking about these fiscal issues for years, and he finally has a platform. When you look at his fiscal and economic policy, the man's a soothsayer, and he's right on. But as
Are we
you're
still
saying,
talking about Ron Paul?
we're still talking about. Hey,
But
he's been right.
But
Exactly. But when he opens his mouth on foreign policy, a lot of conservatives just click out.
I disagree. I think a lot of conservatives and liberal. I think a lot of conservatives love the idea of bringing the troops home and of not funding other countries with foreign aid, and a lot of liberals love the idea of not having these stupid, costly, destructive wars.
But what I think is interesting about Ron Paul, that I think the GOP establishment is finally waking up to, is the way that he's running his campaign. This is a man that's been able to bring in the youth vote, to bring in money raising grassroots strategy. So it's ironic to me that his model of running the campaign, because out of all the candidates that are still within the GOP primary fight, I think he's the one that can actually take it to the convention.
And why is he
Yeah, but he
bringing in all
can't.
these young voters? Because of his foreign policy, these are the young voters who don't want to go off.
And his
But
drug
he
and his
can't
drug war
win.
his drug
Can't
war
win.
policy.
If you're a Republican, man, there's no way that you're going to look at a guy like Ron Paul and go, he could beat Obama. No way.
Well, as
no
Dennis
chance.
Kucinich said, I'm electable if you vote for me. And when it comes to third-party candidates, I want to bring up Ralph Nader, who I don't blame for George Bush getting the White House. I blame 90,000 people in Florida who knew they were a battleground state and voted Nader anyway. But Nader...
I blame 5 people on the Supreme Court who said they don't have to count the ballots.
But here's the thing about Nader.
I blame the
Nader,
dead people who voted. That's
Ralph
who I
Nader
blame.
has... Okay, we're not going to do this one again. Ralph Nader has endorsed Ron Paul.
We're going to get to that.
Ralph Nader, who quasi-endorsed John Edwards in 2008, has now endorsed Ron Paul, which I was like, this is the guy who got the government to put seatbelts in cars, and now he's going to endorse a guy who wants the government to stop putting seatbelts in cars because it's an infringement on liberties. I was shocked by it. Were you guys surprised to hear that the bigger than Chomsky on the left is now endorsing Ron Paul?
No, because I think Ron Paul is more batshit crazy when it gets to his. I mean, if you look at the big issues, like I don't think anybody looks at well, his seatbelt policy's out of his mind. I don't think anybody looks at that. I think they're looking at his foreign policy and going,
Which part of
well,
his foreign
that's-
policy is crazy?
Well, no foreign aid. I mean,
Well,
you
that's
can't do
crazy,
that.
exactly. But a lot of
Yeah.
Republicans like that. You
They
know
like
that.
it because they want the money here. That's
Yeah.
easy to say. Forget it.
But is that not a conservative point of view?
Not necessarily, because you have to. They buy our shit.
That
You
was,
have to give
Rick,
the people.
that was Rick Perry's only position, was stop all foreign aid. So why when Rick
is
Perry...
why he got his butt kicked.
Well, okay, fine, but nobody called him
Yeah.
batshit crazy for calling for it.
Well, I
call
think-
him batshit. I'm a Texan, and I
think batshit
I
crazy
agree
is a
he
little bit...
batshit crazy.
And
for
I
Rick
want to point
Perry,
out,
but
we're not
Well,
here...
when he sits there and
we're
says
not-
that it's okay for Iran to have a nuclear weapon, I don't agree with that.
Right.
But
And I want to say, we're not here to put down Rick Perry. We're just denying him clemency. But I was really fascinated to see that Ron Paul, a former third-party candidate, could pick up the endorsement as a Republican from Ralph Nader, the former third-party candidate. Either Ralph Nader's just determined to destroy his legacy forever, or, you know, Ron Paul is the only candidate with a message that appeals to both sides of the spectrum.
Ralph could just be pissed. You know, he could just be pissed off. That's what I would be like. You know what? I'm gonna piss some people off. Why don't I just do this? I'm mad at what happened to me last time, and I'm gonna endorse the guy. Who's the most loon? That guy. Let's go with that guy. And you know, it mixes it up a little bit.
I thought you said it was Rick Perry. Who's the
no,
biggest loon?
who's still involved? I would say.
Well, the most...
Well, then you have Rick Santorum. I mean...
yeah, but I think people would see through it. They go, Ralph,
gonna
now
start
we
judging
know.
the
Ralph, now we know you're just screwing
Well,
around.
but
Start judging the
yeah.
Republican
The sweater
Party on
vest.
who's the most batshit crazy.
Well,
it's going to be quite a contest.
I do think that it is very telling that Ron Paul did spend many years as a libertarian cranking out those newsletters that he didn't write, but his name is signed to.
Right.
And now he's doing even better since he's re-entered the two-party system. He's getting more traction now and much more coverage than he ever would have gotten as a libertarian candidate. Ask Gary Johnson about that. But historically, 100 years ago this year, Theodore Roosevelt had the most successful third-party candidacy in history when he quit the Republican Party to run as a bull moose progressive. He had essentially handpicked William Howard Taft, that guy, to be his successor, and then he ran against him and got over 1 million votes. Of course, Woodrow Wilson won, but that's the most famous example of a president abandoning his own party.
Taft, not a good example for childhood obesity funding.
Not a very good. Michelle Obama wept.
Can I repeat the point, though, that you just made? He was a Republican, and then he founded the Progressive Party.
Yes.
And so, you know, we hear a lot of people saying that, you know, progressive means you're a liberal, progressive means you're a Democrat. No, progressive means you're a progressive. And as a progressive, Teddy Roosevelt set aside the national parks,
Sure.
which would be, you know, the greatest communist act that any president could ever do if it was done today. He busted the corporations. He was the trust buster.
He was the trust buster,
right?
and the reason he left the GOP was because he was disgusted about the influence of corporate money in politics. I can't imagine that happening today, but I'm of the belief that
he took care of it.
Right, but I'm of the belief.
Killed animals and went to war.
But hang on, here's my thing. Yeah, he would have loved Iraq, but
Right,
I think that sane people are progressive in some areas, conservative in other areas. There's overlap with all. No one's completely liberal or completely conservative. You ever met someone all the way to the fringe? You're like a Star Trek convention goer.
But
In
you just did it. You
Hollywood?
said
Never.
progressive
I
in
never
some
meet those
areas.
people. Yeah.
You just said
Meet those
progressive in
people.
some areas, conservative in others.
Yes,
As
I
if
do
they're
agree. I think every
opposites.
human,
they're not
that's what I'm
opposites.
saying, they're not
Right.
opposites. And so we can say that Dick Cheney is to the left of Barack Obama on marriage equality. We can say
certainly
that
is.
George Bush tripled AIDS funding to Africa.
Yeah.
We can say Bill Clinton balanced a budget 8 years in a row. I hate these terms. I think that they're outdated and they're just designed, if you'll excuse me, by the upper 1% to keep us fighting each other. And so I think this is why Ron Paul does appeal to so many people, because he does appeal to
Yeah, well,
both
I think
sides.
there are people that toe the party line and that you just go, whatever the liberal ideal is, that's what I'm going to jump on board with. But yeah, I think the people in office or running for office, they're going to have to play games with, you know, with where they're from. Obviously, what state they're from matters.
Right.
You know, so I can't. You know,
Well,
Ron Paul can't just go doing everything that you know.
We should also say that when you were talking about that he would have a difficult time against Obama, Ron Paul would.
Yeah,
the fact
debatingly,
is,
he'd get creamed.
in the debate he would get creamed?
Is that a word?
I'm not sure about
In a
that.
I think he would.
debate.
Actually, he would get to the left of him on foreign policy.
Well, before we go to our break,
And he'd pull away a lot of voters from Obama, which none of these other guys running
if
will
Ron
do.
Paul ran as a third-party candidate, I don't know which party he'd hurt more. Welcome back to The Point. I am John Fugelsang, filling in. And this year for Lent, I gave up blind obedience to men wearing dresses with funny hats. Let's go to our second video. This is from YouTube sensation, The Amazing Atheist.
Hello, I'm the Amazing Atheist, and I've long bemoaned the fact that I exist in a two-party system. I only get two choices, but then I realized that based on my geography, I live in a one-party system because I live in a red district of a red state, which means that if you're a presidential candidate with a D next to his name, the D might as well stand for dead in the fucking water. So, if I go to vote and I vote for a Democrat, my Republican district is going to say, "Oh, you voted for a Democrat. That's cute. That's so fucking adorable." Well, we're a Republican district, so you count as a Republican. And let's say that I lived in a blue district. I still live in a red state. So the state would just say to my blue district, "Aw, cute little blue district." That doesn't matter. We're still a red state. Can one of you sagacious motherfuckers on this panel please explain to me why this system makes sense? Justify to me why it still exists, because I'm not smart enough to figure it out.
I think what we just learned is that the atheist does not believe in decaf. However, I am so sagacious I didn't have to look up what that word meant. Brad, here's my question for you.
Yeah.
Does the Amazing Atheist have a point that our system essentially really does leave millions of Americans out in the cold without any hope of real representation?
Well, no, and I don't know who this Amazing Atheist is. He a friend of somebody's here? Because
He's huge on YouTube.
He is?
Yes.
All right. Well, then let's make him. Let's make me huge. This guy is an asshole. What? I mean, is he unclear on how democracy works? You know, yes, you don't always get to have the person that you want to win be the winner.
But you
Yes,
can
the
appreciate
game-
his frustration, right? You can appreciate. I mean, I was talking with
bemoan
Alexis,
it.
and Alexis and I were just saying, "Dude, move, just move."
No, listen, I appreciate his frustration, but what he is doing is he is making it worse. He's bringing this upon himself. He said, you heard in the video, we only have two choices. Where did he ever get the idea that we only have two choices? Every time I go to vote, there's a hell of a lot more than two choices on the ballot. Start voting for them. He's this idea that if you're a blue person in a red district, I mean, this whole blue-red idea, this phony paradigm,
it also really
is
takes.
bullshit,
It
and
also
only makes it
ignores
worse.
the issue of local elections too. I mean, you know, when you have this whole thing of, oh, it's a two-party system, I shouldn't even show up to vote because it's just a Democrat, Republican duopoly. Well, then you're going to deprive yourself of being involved on a civic local level.
It
Avi.
ignores
First of
every
all, yeah,
election.
voting in local elections very 90s. That's all I'm saying. So
That's what
I
it's
don't
all
even know.
about,
who,
man.
That's
That's what it's
like,
all
why don't you
about.
listen to some Depeche Mode while you're at it?
You know
Vote
what?
in
Don't
local
even vote for
elections.
president, but show up and vote for your
So
local
90s.
candidates.
And I'm wondering how pissed he'd be if the district that he was in was aligned with who he'd want to vote for. I think it's because he's in the district and he says it. This is bullshit. But I don't think he'd be bitching about it if his guy would win all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I can see. I mean, God forbid he be surrounded by some crazy red staters, but the one area I could maybe see his point is when you get to the Electoral College level, where you have 48 states. That is winner take all. Maybe moving to more proportional allocation. Imagine what that election would look
I
like. But
disagree with
still,
that, though.
I mean, it just
then
seems
New
like
York
he's
and
whining.
LA,
I
Oh
know.
my
it's everybody
God.
in
We've got
every state.
conservatives disagreeing with conservatives and progressives disagreeing with atheists.
I'm trying to figure out what his point is. I'm
He's
giving him the
complaining
benefit
about
of the doubt.
the two-party system. He's imagining that there is nobody else on the ballot, even here at the table, saying, when you go to vote for president, the last time I voted, there was about 5
That's
people
right,
on
Brad's
the
right.
ballot.
What do you think of them apples?
Well,
I think Brad's right.
And we have Rocky Anderson. He's going to be on there. Vote
Exactly.
for Rocky Anderson.
Exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
stop your whining. I don't understand.
Yeah.
You don't listen. These people who say you waste your vote if you vote for a third party, you don't get a prize for picking the winner.
Yeah, you waste your vote if you vote for someone who's popular because you want to be part of the winning team. That's
Or-
the way to go.
or
you
if
just
you
sit at
vote in
home
local
and bitch
elections.
about it.
Stop it. Now, just knock it off right now. Well, Alexis, you mentioned the 48 states because there are 2 states that are not winner take all, one of which is Nebraska. Now, Nebraska is a reliably red state. However, it's a state where Obama took half the electoral votes in 2008 because as part of Howard Dean's brilliant 50-state strategy, bring that guy back, Dems, as part of his strategy, they had a lot of Obama troops on the ground. They actually called Nebraska Obamaha, which isn't that clever, but it worked. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that Obama took half the electoral votes from there.
Well, how
Now,
many
Al
electoral
Gore
votes
is-
are there in Nebraska? I'm curious. I mean, is it enough to really make a difference? I mean, it's not a very heavily populated.
I actually don't know the exact amount, but in
Can
a
we get
society
that?
when we could have, but look, in a year where it could come down to a 269 electoral college split, every vote counts, even Nebraska. So
Right, that's true.
it is prudent of the administration.
Can I say, John, that you just now played yourself into the phony red, blue, right, left, Republican,
Okay,
Democratic.
you stinking liberal. Tell me how I did that.
Okay. Well, you said Nebraska is a red state. Who says it's a
I
red
said it's a
state?
reliably red state.
Reliably
the same thing
red
the atheist
state.
is
And
talking
you know what?
about.
If you look at any of these, this drives me absolutely crazy. I was working on an election, a concern about an election down in San Diego a couple of years ago. Everybody was saying, oh, it's a reliably red county. It's a totally red county. No Democrat can win there. If you look at the registration, it's something, and I'm going to pull the numbers out of my ass here, but it's something like 200,000 registered Republicans, 100,000 registered Democrats.
That's bullshit. You pulled that out of your ass.
And 300,000 or 400,000 independents, and yet they say, "Oh, it's totally Republican."
Yeah,
Democrats
and you know
can't win
why?
That plays into the bad guys who want you to vote for their people. So don't even bother showing up.
You know why it's reliably red?
Why?
Because conservatives are always more organized. They get the vote out much better than liberals do, and you know this because you're an
I would
angry
have to
liberal.
disagree.
Doesn't this go against what you just said in Nebraska?
No, I said it's reliably red. Hey, look, I'd love to see Bob Kerrey get his old Senate seat back in Nebraska. It could happen, but what I'm saying is
Bob Kerrey, how could he win Nebraska if it's so reliably red? He was a Democrat.
because they had him before. He represented Nebraska before.
But it's reliably red. How did that happen? How did
Texas
Bob
is
Kerrey
reliably
become the
red.
senator?
Texas
Always
is
red.
red,
Always
red,
there
and used
for
to be
years.
Democrat. I
You know
mean,
what happens.
from time to time, California will
Well,
elect
reliably
Republican governors.
reliably blue
so-
California, where Arnold Schwarzenegger was the governor for the last 2 years. I mean,
Right,
get
it
over
happens.
this
Okay,
red-blue
hang
funny
on. No one ever
paradigm.
said California was reliably blue. I'm just going by consistently
They
what
didn't.
Nebraska's
I hear it all the time.
Okay, well, I don't hear
Liberal
that all the time.
California?
We've had a lot more Republican governors in the last
Well,
20
that's
years.
right, but they call it liberal California.
Well, they do, but
Not in Orange County.
they call liberal New York as well. It's a myth. However, this does bring up, tying to the atheist, is the question of the Electoral College. I know it was played to death 11 years ago, 12 years ago, but again, how do we feel whenever I have Republicans tell me we're not a democracy, we're a republic? They're talking about the Electoral College. I have a couple of conservative friends here. Are you guys supporters of the Electoral College, or would you like to see something more along the lines of what the atheists talked about of one man, one vote?
Well, here's what I would say. You have to have the Electoral College because you can't have New York and LA decide how the rest of the country. You can't decide policy for someone in Wyoming. It's not fair. I mean,
So Rhode Island should have as much power as California.
They should have some power. They don't have as much.
Rhode Island does have as much power as California. Should they have as
They
much?
don't have the same amount of electoral vote.
Okay, well, they have the
electoral
same amount of
votes.
senators.
Right, okay, so they have to have a voice. You can't decide, well, I don't care about farming policy. It doesn't affect you if you live in New York City, but it does if you live in, Nebraska or like,
Places like Iowa, obviously,
right,
have an
so
outsized
they have to have their
proportion.
voice. It's not a big one, but you have to have the Electoral College.
Alexis, what
No,
do you
I
think?
agree. I mean, you're there to represent a broad region of peoples. I think getting into one person, one vote, I don't agree with that. I think we need the Electoral College. It's not a perfect system, but it's one that works for us.
Brad?
You're not saying you don't agree with one person, one vote.
Better than Canada's. I don't even know what Canada's
Is it?
Yeah.
I'm just saying, with the Electoral College, I mean, you want a president that's representing a broad range of people.
Of course.
Or not, they would just go to California, New York, Florida, and the most populous states.
Our final point, and perhaps the most inflammatory, is coming up right after this break. Welcome back to The Point. I'm John Fugelsang. Glad to be here with you. In our last segment, of course, the Amazing Atheist managed to do the impossible. He united an entire panel of liberals and conservatives who all think he should just move. But we thank him for the video. And I must say, I've never had a discussion about where the word Nebraska was used that many times without the word Springsteen. So that was a first for me.
Or football.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Let us now go to our final video of the day. This comes to us from the executive director of Why Tuesday, Jacob Soboroff.
Hey, my name is Jacob Soboroff. I'm the executive director of Why Tuesday, and I think that you will see my point. Take a look.
Do you know why historically the elections are held on Tuesdays?
I have no idea.
Anybody know? Okay, I'm going to be stumped on this. Anybody know why we vote on Tuesdays?
Do you happen to know why we do vote on Tuesday?
No.
No, I don't.
Here at this school, that everybody.
No.
To be truthfully, I'm not sure why they tried.
Okay, thanks very much. We believe Election Day should be moved to the weekend from where it's been for 167 years on the Tuesday after the first Monday in November so that more people can vote. And we hope you do too. Log on to whytuesday.org, sign our petition, and join our movement. Thanks a lot.
Before I go to you guys, I have the answer to that question. When Election Day was established by Congress in 1845, America was primarily an agricultural society, which means we can blame the same people we blame for daylight savings time. November was chosen because the fall harvest was over, but it was still mild enough for farmers and rural workers to travel long distances to get to the polls. And Tuesday was chosen because most of the country had to travel this great distance, and you can't have it on Sunday. It's a day of worship, so they had Monday as a buffer day for traveling to go vote. This is why we vote on Tuesdays in 2012. Avi, what is the... Exactly. Well, yeah, and you know, sometimes half of tradition is the dead controlling the living.
Like in Florida.
Exactly.
See what I did there? That's, all right. Yeah.
So what's the bigger problem?
Comment.
What's the bigger problem here, that we only vote on Tuesdays or that nobody knows why?
Probably that nobody knows why, and nobody knows who they're voting for, probably, and what they stand for most of the time. No, I think voting on Tuesday is okay, because I think people who want to vote are going to do it no matter what, and people who don't give a crap, I think if you put it on the weekend, you'd have less voter turnout. See, so I'd be like, I got football today,
but
I got stuff to do.
Here's my point for all of y'all. Why can't it be a week? Why can't voting be like Hanukkah? Why can't we have 8 days from Sunday to Sunday to show up? It'll upset the fundamentalist Christians who think Sunday's the Sabbath.
Yeah, you're going to blame the Jews.
I mean, you do have 35 states now have early voting that
Florida
goes on.
has it,
So
quite a
I mean,
few.
you do have some ways to capture some of the people that maybe can't come on a Tuesday. You have absentee ballots. A couple states have mail-in ballots. So there are some ways, but you know, my whole point is, you know, if 122 million people can compel themselves to vote for the American Idol winner, they can find a way.
That's on their phone.
Maybe we
That's
start
on our
texting.
phone.
We start texting.
Would you support being able to vote online so every American can vote then?
No.
Oh, no.
No.
And this is the interesting question, because a lot of people like low voter turnout in America, and that's what this issue speaks to. Now, some people say low voter turnout is a pretty good thing because there's so many idiots out there. Why do we want them voting? I think it's a really bad thing. I think having high voter turnout encourages people to be more informed. If you have a whole week, you can see who's leading in the polls, as opposed to now, where if you're on the West Coast and your guy's losing nationwide, a lot of people don't even show up to vote, and then they don't wind up voting in their local campaigns. I think having it be a full week encourages much more democracy, gets people out of their houses, gets them much more politically engaged. Why would anyone, Brad, oppose high voter turnout?
Well, Republicans oppose high voter turnout because it does not work out well for them. That said,
but Democrats don't fight for it that much, do they?
Oh, sure they do. They fight like hell. Are you kidding me? Of course they do.
No, he's making a fair point.
They fight like hell to register people to vote, to get people out to the polls, because they know they do better when more people show up to vote.
Yes, they do. And you know, I think that's maybe Jesse Jackson's greatest career accomplishment, is the amount of voter registration he's done. But I don't hear Democrats arguing to expand it beyond more than one day.
Well, actually, they do. They're the ones who are in favor of early voting. You talked about Florida, where they also have early voting. The Republicans Republican governor down there has just cut that in half, and they're fighting to keep early voting from happening on Sundays before elections. Republicans are against people voting. They have been working on this for years. They continue to work on this.
Let me ask a question. How much more expensive would it be if you dragged out elections over 8 or 9? Wouldn't it cost a ton more dough?
The point is we already do it with the early voting, which I'm no fan of. That said, and I like Jake. I've worked with Jacob Soboroff before. Big fan of his. However, I disagree with him in no small reason because of a video by Jacob Soboroff. Back in 2008, he interviewed Joe Biden and asked him these same questions. And he said, should we move Election Day to the weekend? And Biden said, well, no, because I think then people will go out of town. They'll make it a long holiday. I think he's absolutely right. So here is the solution for my friend Jacob Soboroff at Why Tuesday. Move it, make it declare it a holiday. It should be a holiday.
I agree.
But it should not be Tuesday, because then you'll just make a long weekend of it, right? So move it to Wednesday. You would. Move it to Wednesday. Have it be in the middle of the week. It's a holiday. It's kind of hard to go out of town and make it a 3 or 4 day weekend. Make it a holiday on Wednesday. Everybody shows up to vote.
That's awfully Weasley, though. I like the long weekend idea.
I like the whole week. I like voting Hanukkah.
Yeah.
But you already can.
Let me ask Alexis.
And it's a bad idea, by the way.
Brad does make a good point in that it has traditionally been Republicans who have opposed expanding the voter rolls. I'll bring up 1992 when President George Bush Sr. vetoed the motor voter bill. Now, this was a bill that was very simple. It would just automatically get you registered to vote when you get your driver's license. The argument we heard from the Republicans back then was, it's not a free society if you're forcing people to vote. Well, they weren't forcing anyone to vote. They were just making it easier to get registered.
Well, I'd be curious.
I asked her, not you.
All right,
Alexis, seriously, is it not? It has historically been the Republicans on the side of reducing the voter rolls.
I think, look, any way that we can bring more people in to vote is a great thing to do.
Well, you are awesome.
Well, that's not what the Republican Party's position on.
No, but she's better than the Republican Party.
And you don't have to go back to 1992. You can go back to last week.
This is a blood sport. Both sides each do their own thing. I mean,
no, they don't.
They do. They do.
Well, in the case of getting more people out to vote, I do agree with Brad on this. Historically, the Democratic Party has been more on top of that.
Right. I think there's a general assumption that, well, poor people don't vote, or people that is uninformed, so they're all going to vote for Democrats. Which I don't necessarily think is true. I think if you're in certain pockets of the country, I don't think it would matter.
There's lots of poor people who want millionaires to get a tax cut. They're out there.
I don't know if it's true, and I don't care if it's true. But I will tell you that there was a concerted effort by the Republican Party. You don't have to go back to 1992. We are seeing state after state after state where the Republican Party is making it more difficult to cast your vote. They are purposely disenfranchising voters, forcing them to bring photo ID to the polling place to vote because they know that elderly, minorities, and students don't have the photo ID that is needed.
That is true. In some states, you are not allowed to use a student ID, but you are allowed to use an NRA membership card.
This is happening in state after state, and they know they're disenfranchising people, and this is the Republican Party doing it, period.
Right, but I was pretty good at getting fake student IDs, so I don't know whether that's a good idea.
Well, there you go, and you're encouraging voter fraud, apparently.
Drinking at 15.
Okay, so what about mail-in voting? I mean, doesn't that solve the problem a bit if you can vote several days early? That's how our troops vote.
Well, yeah, they don't have much of a choice.
If the states can actually get the ballots out in the mail on time, and we've seen that problem in the midterms. I mean, I think New York had a problem getting the ballots out.
It's also a terrible idea.
And also, isn't some absentee ballots are not counted, right? Unless
they're often not counted.
No, they're all counted. They are all counted, but they're counted by the same crappy voting machines that count them when you fill them out on election day if you're lucky enough to vote.
Aren't they counted last? So if somebody completely destroys the other candidate in the state, they don't bother counting the absentee ballots.
They still bother to count them.
Okay.
Avi, you said a few minutes ago that would be expensive to have it open for 8 days, but I think this is an example of where we're looking at the difference between big government and good government.
Right. I'm just guessing. I don't know whether
Well, no, it would be more
Right,
expensive, but in some states it costs, say, $2 or $3 per voter to have it open for a full day.
Right.
But the consequence you have is these really, really long lines where a lot of people have to get back to their jobs and they get off the line, they go back to work, and as a consequence, they are underrepresented in Congress. So I think that this is the sort of thing where unless you're a hardcore one-percenter, I would imagine a lot of conservatives would agree with expanding for convenience's sake, for people who have to work.
Well, here's the thing. Also, I think if you expanded it over a week, you're going to have Tuesday, this guy's ahead. Guess what? Now Wednesday, now this guy's ahead.
But that's great, and that will get more people into vote.
Oh, you're saying they wouldn't count it?
No,
but they do exit polls.
Because that's what they do anyway. Most states
they'll do exit polls. He's right.
Yeah. Well, they'll do exit. They're going to do that anyway. But most states do already allow this early voting, which I'm also against, by the way. Just want to be on record.
Which I think you're crazy for.
That's all right.
But if you're allowed to.
wrong,
But if there are exit
Yeah.
polling and you do have a chance to see, and we saw this back in 2008 when a lot of McCain voters on the West Coast didn't even show up because they saw Obama was so far ahead before their polling places closed. So to me, it makes a lot of sense, and it would generate more interest to get to the polls by Friday.
But the news media already does not release the exit polls. Notice they said after 2004 and 2000, pay no attention to those exit polls. They don't mean anything. They're not accurate.
No, but they're going to do it anyway.
Until last Tuesday night when they had the Arizona primary, and with 0% of ballots counted, they announced Mitt Romney the winner. How?
I mean,
because of the exit polls. So the exit polls are completely wrong unless the media is using them to call an entire election.
Well, there are trees that knew Mitt Romney was going to win Arizona.
Apparently, they are the right height, and they...
Okay, so what about, Brad, I'm going to let you go unleashed on this. What about the voter ID laws that are cropping up all around the states? Is it really a concern about voter fraud, or is it a concern about keeping poor folks and seniors and students from voting?
That's exactly what this is. This is meant to keep Democratic-leaning voters from voting, period. And it's not voter ID laws. These are polling place photo ID restrictions. Voter ID laws are fine. Most states already have voter ID laws. You can show a bank statement, you can show a lease, a check stub, or whatever. We're talking about very narrowly defined photo ID that these guys who are implementing these laws know that Democrats disproportionately do not own. This is a voter suppression tactic. Because they don't drive, because they live in a city, because they're poor,
And to me,
because they're 90 years old.
I think it's crazy as well, because a lot of seniors tend to vote conservative. A lot of poor folks tend to vote conservative. So it's something that
I don't care
mystifies
who
me.
they vote for. Stop keeping them from being able to cast their legal vote when there is no impersonation problem at the polling place.
But why would there be a problem of getting a photo ID? Like, why is that such a big deal? I don't understand why.
Well, A, if you had to pay for it, it's a poll tax. B,
Most
if you happen to
states
have...
provide them
For free, right? Okay, if you can
get
get to the DMV. Now remember, you don't have a driver's license because you don't drive. So now you have to get to the DMV, and then you have to pay for it. If you have a birth certificate, many people do not have a birth certificate at all. They have to pay for that. That's a poll tax. Don't get me started on taking away
what we're talking about is very often
not responsible enough to
what
get
adults
that.
walking around with no form of identification to prove who they
I got
are.
family.
Because you
I got some relatives I'll introduce you to
an
sometime.
attractive young white woman who has a driver's license.
She's white? If she's white, I'm an albino mime. I really want to really quickly just shift gears, just to ask you guys. I'm going to shift gears really quickly to ask you guys, in the wake of the Michigan primary, where Rick Santorum was outspent by Mitt Romney, where Mitt Romney has arguably been running for 5 years for this gig, where Mitt Romney, it's his home state, and yet he just narrowly edged him out, and apparently they're splitting the delegates anyway.
Right.
Who won? Did Mitt Romney win it? Did Rick Santorum win it? Or did Barack Obama win it? Starting with you, Avi.
I think Romney won, well, factually he won, but I mean in theory, I think he won only because Santorum pulled that, which I thought was a cool trick. Hey, if you're a Democrat, go out, or they told all the Democrats to go vote.
Operation
Hilarity. Which is exactly what Romney admitted to doing for Tsongas.
Right, but so he still pulled it off. So I would have embraced it the other way if I was Romney. I'd be like, hey, look, I pulled that, and he pulled it with me, and I still kicked his
So you
butt.
think Romney? So you think Romney won?
Yeah, I think
But you
he did.
support Romney.
Yeah, I like him best out of what's around, I would say. I don't know if that's I'm not a rabid supporter of him, but yeah, I think he's...
Are there rabid supporters of Mitt Romney?
Yeah, I would say...
Mitt!
Yeah, those who show up. Yeah. Vote for him.
Mormons in the house!
Yeah, so.
Brad, who won?
Well, if you believe the voting machines, then Mitt Romney won, but politically, obviously Barack Obama won because the Republican Party this year is an absolute fucking disaster.
Okay.
Period.
Alexis, who won?
Just win, baby. Win's a win. I think Mitt Romney.
Mitt Romney won it?
Absolutely, he had to, and it's a good thing he did because his campaign would have been in shambles.
His campaign,
as opposed to what it is now.
Well, it's still very well funded. It's still, he's still the clear front runner. If he hadn't won it, I agree with Alexis. If he hadn't won it, you would have some furious Republicans over this, and it bought him a little time. It's going to be interesting seeing what happens on Super Tuesday.
Super Tuesday will be
So
very
what happens if this week, if Mitt Romney's a goat and Rick Santorum comes out looking really well, we have lots of Republicans in the establishment who are terrified of Santorum doing well.
Yeah, I'm terrified of him doing well because I ain't voting for a guy like that. That's what people I think don't understand. And I don't consider myself necessarily one or the other, but I'm a centrist, and elections are not decided by Bill Maher, and they're not decided by Sean Hannity. They're decided by the guys in the middle, and people in the middle are not voting for Santorum.
No, they are not.
So if you're a Republican and you want Obama out of office, throw your weight behind Romney, because he's the most, I would say, centrist guy out there. He's not a right-wing lunatic, you know.
No, that's what's hurting him.
Which
that's what's hurting him with the
unfortunately
base.
screws him in the party. But,
Well, yeah, and I think you keep hearing this chatter of a brokered convention. I think if Romney doesn't perform well on Super Tuesday, I think you're going to start seeing that as maybe a real possibility. But it is surprising to me just how poorly these guys are closing these cases. I mean, they are not staying on message at all. You've got people talking about contraception issues.
I give the president credit for that, by the way.
Yeah.
I think that it was a brilliant move on the White House's part to shift the debate off the economy
Exactly.
the most unpopular.
It's amazing to me. You've got Newt Gingrich talking about trees, and so I mean, it would be nice to see them get back to jobs in the economy and finishing strong.
Brad, I know a lot of liberals who are praying for exactly what Alexis talks about, a brokered convention. I think it's a pretty bad idea for liberals to want that. Isn't there a very strong chance that if they went all the way to the convention, the GOP will in the summer unveil a brand new shiny face?
Christie's the only guy, and they don't.
I would say Republicans should be hoping for a brokered convention right now. They hate all of their
because they can
candidates.
rebrand the entire campaign,
and there won't be time, and there won't be the same kind of time.
There won't be time to vet anybody.
Exactly.
There won't be time to smear them.
Get your brokered convention. Get Chris Christie in. He will step up and serve, and he is the greatest threat against Barack Obama. Period.
Exactly. That's good advice. And remember, Santorum will not be smeared. We'll be back with our final points right after this. Welcome back. Justin Bieber turns 18 this week, so it's officially no longer creepy to have his picture on your cell block wall. Really quick in saying goodbye, I want to thank all of you for being a wonderful panel. Tell the folks out there where they can see you.
I'll be in Vegas the 20th through the 25th at the Improv at Harrah's.
Brad?
You can find me fighting for your right to vote, whether you're Republican, Democrat, or anything else, at bradblog.com and every Wednesday, 3 p.m. Pacific time on kpfk.org.
Brilliant. Alexis?
You can find me at pjtv.com. Not to be confused with BJTV. That's Bon Jovi television, by the way.
Good.
Or something else if you Google it the wrong way.
Right.
And I will be with Stephanie Miller's Sexy Liberal Comedy Tour at the Chicago Theater Saturday, March 3rd, and Pope Joy Hall in Albuquerque on the 31st. And my off-Broadway solo show, Guilt, a Love Story, is in Seattle on the 3rd of April, I think. I'm John Fugelsang. I want to thank this entire wonderful panel and to thank you for watching. And remember, our deepest congratulations go out to Snooki on being pregnant and on actually finding someone willing to have unprotected sex with her. We'll see you next time on The Point.